The galaxy belonged to the insects, and the last hope of salvation was adrift on a forgotten human ship. General Hicks was about to wake up. Dorian scholar Cade's green eyes glinted with excitement as he turned to his colleague Zeke. Cade, an expert in Prion galactic history, had spent years poring over fragmented records in the grand archives on the Oran homeworld. Today he made a discovery that could change everything. "Feast your eyes on this," he said, showing chronicles from the darkest era of their past when the ruthless Skarx insects nearly drove them to extinction. Cade pulled out an ancient datapad, its screen flickering to life. Zick leaned forward, mandibles clicking with intrigue. "I thought all records from that time were lost. What have you found?" "Not all," Cade replied. "This is the personal memoir of our High Commander from the eve of our destruction." His voice dropped to a reverent whisper. "It speaks of a lone human warship that arrived in our darkest hour, carrying a warrior from a bygone age. A human? What could one human do against the might of the Skarx?" Zavi scoffed. Cade's eyes gleamed. This was no ordinary human. He was General Eric Hicks, a legend exiled from his own kind, adrift in cryo-sleep for centuries. If these records are true, his ruthless, audacious strategy saved us from annihilation. Zek's skepticism melted into fascination. "The Skarx Queen's armada was unstoppable, 10 times larger than any ever seen," Zeke said. "That's what our leaders thought," Cade replied. "But Hicks had a plan so daring and brutal they thought him insane." He paused, the weight of the discovery heavy in the air. "Yet with extinction at our door, they had no choice but to listen." Zick leaned back, mandibles agape. "By the ancestors, what did he propose?" Cade smiled, the thrill of revealing a secret history dancing in his eyes. "Let me read to you, my friend, and you shall see the untold story of how one human from another age rewrote the stars and changed our fate forever." So began the chronicle that reshaped the galaxy's understanding of its past and the debt owed to one legendary human general, without whom none would have survived to remember his name. Cade's voice lowered to a conspiratorial whisper as he continued the tale. Hicks knew that the rigid caste system and unquestioning loyalty to the Queen was the Skarx's greatest weakness. He proposed a daring plan, capturing one of their high-ranking commanders and using advanced human neural interface technology to extract the complex pheromone codes the Queen used to control her swarms. Impossible. Zek's mandibles clicked in disbelief. Our finest scientists had tried for decades to crack the Skarx pheromone language. It was unbreakable.
"Indeed, that was the consensus," Cade replied. "But the technology Hicks possessed was centuries beyond our own. The neural interface, he claimed, could not only decipher the pheromones but synthesize them, allowing us to issue fake orders under the Queen's authority." Zeke's eye stalks widened as the implications sank in. "By the ancestors, we could turn our own army against her." "Precisely," Cade said. "But capturing a commander cost us dearly. 1/3 of our remaining ships were lost in the battle." Yet against all odds, Hicks succeeded. He broke the code and grafted the interface to the commander's brain. Through it, he began injecting false orders into the Skarx command network. Zek leaned forward, hanging on every word. "And then chaos erupted in their ranks," Cade continued. "Confusion, discord, Skarx ships turning on each other, sabotaging their own vessels. It bought us precious time and significantly weakened their forces." A flicker of hope danced in Zeke's eyes, only to be snuffed out by Cade's next words. "But even with the Skarx in disarray, the Queen's numbers were still vastly superior. In a head-on confrontation, our defeat was certain." Zeke slumped back, despair settling over him like a shroud. Then all was lost. Cade shook his head, a strange gleam in his eyes. Not quite. Everything hinged on Hicks's next move. A strategy so audacious and terrifying that even our High Commander trembled at its mere mention. Zeke's mandibles hung slack, his eye stalks frozen in disbelief. "By the ancestors, he faced down the Queen herself," Cade chuckled, but shaking his head. "Not quite alone. The records state he brought a handful of our finest commandos with him, but according to their accounts, they may as well have been spectators." "I don't understand," Zeke clicked. "How did they even get aboard the mothership?" "Hicks used the captured commander like a puppet," Cade explained. "Had it order the mothership to lower its defenses, allow a small shuttle to dock under the guise of a peace envoy." Zeke's eye stalk swiveled incredulously. "And the Queen fell for this ruse?" "Initially, but she realized the deception the moment Hicks and his team emerged." Cade leaned forward, his voice lowering. "That's when all hells broke loose." "What do you mean?" "The Queen, enraged at the trickery, set her elite guard upon them." "But Hicks," Cade paused as if struggling to find the word. He fought like nothing the commandos had ever seen, like a force of nature itself. Zick leaned in, hanging on every word. How so? Armed with nothing but a pair of ancient slug-throwers, he tore through the Skark's ranks, his movements a blur. He dodged and weaved through their fire, all the while cutting them down with ruthless efficiency. The commandos could only watch in awe as he broke the Skark's line single-handedly, leaving a trail of broken bodies in his wake as he charged for the queen. Incredible, Zick breathed. But surely he didn't reach her unscathed just before he could close the distance. A guard's plasma scythe found its mark. The searing blade cut into his flesh, the stench of charred meat filling the air. But Hicks' Cade shook his head in wonder. He barely flinched, never broke stride. Zeke's mandibles worked soundlessly, trying to process the impossible tale. And then, in one bound, he was on the queen, grappling her massive form. Before anyone could react, he had his gun to her head, the ultimate checkmate. He gave her a choice: stand down, have her armada leave our space forever, or die and let the swarms destroy themselves in the power void that would follow, and she yielded. Just like that, she had no choice, Cade replied. Hicks had beaten her. Cade sat back, his eyes distant. The commandos could hardly comprehend what they had just witnessed. What Hicks had done should have been impossible, and yet Zick shook his head, trying to wrap his mind around it all. You said that wasn't even his final play. What more could he possibly have done after that? As the Skark's armada began to withdraw, Hicks revealed that he had one final ace up his sleeve. The neural interface hadn't just allowed him to issue false orders. He had used it to plant a hidden directive deep in the Skark's hive mind. If the queen ever broke her word and attacked again, this hidden command would activate, causing the Skarks to turn on each other in an uncontrollable frenzy of self-destruction. By the ancestors, Zick clicked in disbelief. The sheer ruthlessness of it, I can hardly fathom. Cade nodded grimly. Our High Commander was equally shocked, but could not deny its brutal effectiveness as a deterrent. And history proves it worked. The Skarks never again dared to invade our space, even long after that queen's reign ended. You think Hicks' directive became part of their genetic memory, passed down through generations, permanently altering their behavior towards us, Zick mused. It's the only explanation that makes sense, Cade said. With the Skarks pacified, we could finally start rebuilding our shattered world. The High Commander offered Hicks a place of the highest honor in our society, but he politely declined. He didn't want to stay after all he had done for us. Zick cocked his head. Hicks said he had unfinished business back in human space, loose ends to tie up. Our leaders gifted him a small fleet of our finest ships in gratitude, and we watched as the human who saved us all vanished back into the stars. Cade sighed, his expression enigmatic. His ultimate fate is a mystery. Some believe he died a hero fighting some great evil threatening his own kind. Others say he found a way to cheat death itself, that he still watches over humanity from the shadows. The RN scholar paused, his brow furrowing. There is one strange detail that has always puzzled me, something the High Commander only briefly alluded to in his memoirs. What do you mean? Zeke leaned forward, his eye stalks narrowing. The High Commander wrote that when Hicks first arrived, he claimed to have been exiled from human space, his ship adrift for centuries. But that wasn't the whole truth. What do you mean? The High Commander had our engineers secretly examine Hicks' ship while the human was leading the assault on the Skarks. What they found raised more questions than answers. The ship was undoubtedly of human design and had seen battle. But the engineers determined it couldn't have been more than a decade old, certainly not the centuries Hicks claimed. And there were no signs of the wear and tear you'd expect from a ship adrift that long. Hicks lied about his exile, the duration of his journey. Zick clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. The High Commander thought the same. He confronted Hicks about it after the Skarks were defeated. You know what Hicks said? He smiled and said, "The truth is a matter of circumstances." It's not all things to all people all the time. The High Commander took that to mean Hicks had his reasons for not being fully forthcoming, and he let it go out of respect for the man who saved us all. He didn't press further. But it does make one wonder about Hicks' true origins, his motives. Perhaps he was on a secret mission for human leadership or a rogue agent pursuing his own agenda. You don't suppose could he have been a time traveler sent from the future to alter history? They sat in contemplative silence, pondering the enigma of Eric Hicks. Then a thought visibly struck Zick. Cade, the war crimes Hicks was allegedly exiled for. Does the High Commander's memoir provide any details about those? Cade paused, his gaze distant as he flipped through the yellowed pages of the memoir. His brow furrowed in concentration. He began to read aloud according to the memoir. Hicks spoke of a conflict known as the Arcturian Insurrection. A group of human colonists on the planet Arcturus III had rebelled against the Earth government, and Hicks, who was a young officer at the time, was sent to quell the uprising. A rebellion? What caused it? The memoir doesn't say, but it does mention that the colonists had managed to gain control of a stockpile of nuclear weapons. They were threatening to detonate them if their demands for independence were not met. Nuclear weapons. Zeke's mandibles clicked in disbelief. That's madness. Hicks realized that negotiation was futile, that the colonists would never back down. So he made a decision, a unilateral one. What did he do? He launched a preemptive strike on the colony. His forces decimated their defenses and their infrastructure. The rebellion was effectively over in a matter of hours. A heavy silence hung in the air. Zeke finally spoke, his voice a whisper. And the colonists? Thousands of civilian lives were lost in the attack, including many who had not actively supported the insurrection. By the ancestors, Zeke breathed. The Earth government hailed Hicks as a hero for his decisive action, but many in the military saw it differently. They viewed his actions as a gross overreach of authority, a violation of the rules of engagement. Cade turned the page, his finger tracing the words as he read. Hicks was court-martialed, found guilty of war crimes. The judge sentenced him to exile as an alternative to execution. Did the High Commander believe Hicks' story? The High Commander noted that Hicks spoke of the incident with deep regret, saying he carried the weight of those deaths with him every day since. He believed Hicks was a man haunted by his past, seeking redemption through his actions in the present. That would certainly explain a lot, Zeke mused. The two scholars pondered this revelation, a flicker of recognition flashing across Zeke's face. I remember reading something once about human psychology, about how they often Zeke's brow furrowed as he pondered the implications of this revelation, his eye stalks swiveling to meet Cade's gaze. I once read about a concept in human psychology called moral injury. It's when an individual commits, witnesses, or fails to prevent acts that go against their own deeply held moral beliefs. From what you've told me, it sounds like Hicks may have been suffering from this condition. That would certainly align with the High Commander's observations of Hicks' behavior. He wrote that Hicks often seemed distant and preoccupied, as if he was constantly wrestling with some inner demon. His actions during the Arcturian insurrection must have fundamentally violated his own moral code, Zeke mused. The weight of those civilian deaths, the guilt of having overstepped his authority. Indeed. The High Commander also noted that Hicks had a tendency to take unnecessary risks, almost as if he had a death wish. Perhaps he saw his mission to save us as a way to not only redeem himself but to find a meaningful death in the process, Zeke said thoughtfully. But in the end, he chose to leave rather than stay and be celebrated as a hero. Maybe he felt he still had more to atone for, that his redemption was not yet complete. The human psyche is a complex and often contradictory thing, Cade agreed. Hicks' motivations may have been multifaceted. In fact, the High Commander wrote of a final conversation he had with Hicks before his departure. What did they discuss? Hicks spoke cryptically of a greater threat looming on the horizon, one he felt compelled to confront. When the High Commander pressed him for more information, Hicks merely smiled sadly and said, "In time, all will be revealed with that." He boarded his ship and set off into the unknown, leaving us to wonder at the mysteries he left in his wake. The two scholars sat back in their chairs, both lost in thought as they contemplated the incredible story they had just pieced together. The enigma of Eric Hicks, the human who had saved their species, seemed only to deepen with each new revelation. As the enigma of Eric Hicks hung heavy in the air, Zeke's eye stalks suddenly shot upright, quivering with excitement. "Cade, I think I may have just made a connection," he clicked urgently. Cade leaned forward, his interest piqued. "What is it, my friend?" Remember Hicks' cryptic warning about a greater threat looming on the horizon. "I think it might be related to a puzzling astronomical phenomenon our scientists have been observing in recent years." Cade's brow furrowed. "Go on." "Our astronomers have detected strange gravitational anomalies emanating from the Tartarus Rift," Zeke explained, his mandibles clicking rapidly. "The anomalies suggest the presence of an incredibly massive object, or perhaps a cluster of objects. But every probe we've sent to investigate has mysteriously disappeared without a trace." "You think this could be the threat Hicks was alluding to?" "It's possible. The timing of the anomaly's appearance roughly coincides with Hicks' departure from our space. If Hicks, with his advanced human technology, detected these anomalies before we did. He may have realized their potential implications long before us. A heavy silence settled over the room as the two scholars contemplated this revelation. Finally, Cade spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think Hicks set out to confront this threat alone, Chief? Or was he planning to warn the rest of humanity? Given his past and his apparent desire for redemption, he may have felt a personal responsibility to deal with the threat himself. A single human taking on such a monumental task, it's almost beyond comprehension." If the story of Eric Hicks is true, it would rewrite not just our history but the history of the entire galaxy. It would paint a very different picture of humanity than the one most races currently hold. Far from being the primitive, warmongering species of legend, they may be the unknowing saviors of the galaxy, with Hicks as their unsung champion. The two scholars looked at each other, the weight of their discovery settling heavily upon their shoulders. The implications were profound, the potential consequences staggering. In that moment, they both knew their view of the universe and humanity's place within it would never be the same again. The mystery of Eric Hicks had just taken on a whole new dimension, and they were determined to unravel it, no matter where the truth might lead them.